before names, before borders.
Before memory itself, there was only this land.
Vast and silent beneath an endless sky, a world carved by time beyond comprehension. Ancient Montana, where oceans once vanished and forests rose from stone.
Where creatures so large they now exist only as fossils once ruled the earth. Then came the ice, slow, relentless, reshaping everything it touched.
Mountains were sharpened, valleys cut open, and entire worlds buried beneath glaciers that moved like living continents.
When the ice retreated, it left behind a raw, open wilderness.
And into that world came the first humans, crossing into North America through the ancient Bering Land Bridge.
They did not conquer the land.
They learned it,
followed its rhythms, its herds, its silence. Generations later, nations like the Blackfeet Nation and Crow Tribe turned survival into culture,
living in balance with the buffalo and the endless plains. Then the horizon changed. Explorers like Meriwether Lewis and William Clark crossed rivers and mountains, opening the door to a transformation that would never stop.
Gold was discovered.
Towns exploded overnight.
Conflict followed.
And on the banks of the Little Bighorn River, history erupted in fire and silence.
Railroads arrived.
Copper rose from the earth. Power shifted.
The frontier disappeared, but the land endured.
And Montana was never the same again. The land that would one day be called Montana did not begin with people, or borders, or memory.
It began with forces, so immense and patient, that they reshaped the very crust of the earth. Long before names, before maps, before even the idea of a nation.
This region existed as a restless landscape where seas advanced and retreated,
where sediment buried forests and revealed them again,
and where life rose, flourished,
and vanished in cycles that stretched across millions of years.
In places like the Hell Creek Formation,
the ground itself tells that
story, layers of stone holding, the remnants of a prehistoric world where massive reptiles once moved through humid plains, where predators hunted and ecosystems thrived until a sudden, catastrophic extinction rewrote the future of life on Earth. After the age of giants ended, time did not pause, it deepened. Ice came, not as a single event, but as a slow, grinding force.
Glaciers crept across the northern edges of what is now Montana,
reshaping mountains, carving valleys, and leaving behind the dramatic terrain that would later define the region's identity.
When the ice finally withdrew, it revealed a land both raw and open, a place of vast plains and distant horizons,
where wind became a constant companion and survival required adaptation.
It was into this emerging world that the first humans arrived,
crossing into North America over the Bering Land Bridge.
They came not as conquerors,
but as observers and participants in a system far older than themselves,
learning to read the land, to follow migrating animals,
and to exist within a balance that demanded respect. Over thousands of years, these early inhabitants became nations, distinct cultures shaped by geography,
climate, and tradition. The Blackfeet Nation came to dominate the northern plains,
their lives intricately tied to the movements of the buffalo and the cycles of the seasons.
To the south and east, the Crow Tribe developed a society deeply connected to trade,
diplomacy, and mobility. The Cheyenne, among others, adapted to the open plains with remarkable skill,
building communities that thrived in an environment outsiders would later struggle to
understand.
These were not static societies. They were dynamic, evolving, and responsive to change.
The introduction of the horse, which spread northward from Spanish territories, revolutionized life across the plains.
Hunting became faster, travel more efficient, and warfare more complex.
Power shifted, alliances formed and dissolved, and the landscape became a stage for movement,
negotiation, and survival.
For centuries, this world existed largely beyond the awareness of Europeans. When contact finally came, it was tentative at first, explorers and traders moving into a land
they did not fully understand. In the early 19th century, the expedition led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark passed through the region,
part of a broader effort to explore the vast territory acquired in the Louisiana Purchase. Their journey was often portrayed as one of discovery,
but in truth, it was an introduction to landscapes already known,
to cultures already established,
and to a reality far more complex than any map could convey.
Indigenous knowledge guided them, sustained them, and in many ways, made their survival possible. What followed was not an immediate
These pelts are
transformation,
fine.
but a gradual
Equal
intrusion. Fur traders
Decent
established networks that connected Montana to global markets, exchanging pelts for goods while quietly altering local economies and relationships. With trade came disease, reducing populations and destabilizing communities.
Yet even as these pressures mounted, the full force of change had not yet arrived.
That would come with the promise of gold. In 1862,
Gold was discovered at Grasshopper Creek.
igniting a rush that would redefine the region. Prospectors flooded into the territory, driven by ambition, desperation, and the enduring myth of instant wealth.
Camps sprang up almost overnight,
Evolving into towns like Bannock and Virginia City, places where law was fragile,
fortunes were unpredictable.
and life was lived at the edge of chaos. The gold rush was not simply an economic phenomenon, it was a cultural collision. Thousands of newcomers brought with them new systems, new expectations, and little understanding of the land they were entering.
For indigenous nations,
This influx represented not just intrusion, but displacement.
conflicts became inevitable.
Treaties were negotiated and broken, often in rapid succession. The US government, intent on asserting control,
Deployed military forces to enforce boundaries that had never existed before.
the result was a series of confrontations that reshaped the balance of power across the region.
Among the most significant was the battle near,
The Little Bighorn River in 1876,
where a coalition of native warriors achieved a decisive victory against U.S. forces led by George Armstrong Custer.
it was a moment of resistance.
A demonstration of strength and unity, but it also marked a turning point,
The response from the United States was swift and overwhelming.
leading to increased military pressure and the eventual
Confinement of many native nations to reservations. As the 19th century moved forward, Montana underwent
another transformation.
this time driven by infrastructure and industry. Railroads extended their reach into the territory, connecting remote regions to national markets and enabling the movement of goods, people, and ideas on an unprecedented scale. Towns stabilized, economies diversified,
And the image of the American
West began to shift from frontier.
wilderness to organized settlement,
The cattle industry flourished,
with vast herds roaming the open.
range and cowboys driving them across long distances. For a time, it seemed as though the land offered limitless opportunity.
But the land itself imposed limits,
The winter of 1886-1887,
was brutally unforgiving.
with extreme cold and heavy snowfall devastating cattle populations and collapsing the open range system.
Ranching did not disappear, but it changed, becoming more structured, more controlled.
And more dependent on planning rather than expansion. This pattern, growth followed by correction, would repeat throughout Montana's history. Beneath the surface, another resource was reshaping the state. In Butte, enormous deposits of copper were discovered, triggering an industrial boom that would make the city one of the most important mining centers in the world. As electricity became central to modern life, demand for copper surged, and Butte earned the title, the richest hill on earth. Figures like Marcus Daly and William A. Clark rose to prominence,
Their wealth and influence extending far beyond the mines. But prosperity came at a cost. Labor conditions were harsh. Environmental damage was severe.
and economic power became concentrated in the hands of a few. Workers organized, strikes erupted, and Montana,
Became a focal point for labor movements that would echo across the nation.
in 1889, Montana officially achieved statehood, marking its formal entry into the United States. Yet statehood did not resolve the tensions embedded in its history. It simply reframed them. The early 20th century brought waves of homesteaders, encouraged by federal policies that promised land and independence. Many arrived with hope, determined to build lives on the plains. Some succeeded, but many encountered the harsh realities of drought, isolation, and economic instability. The land could be generous, but it could also be unforgiving. When droughts struck and markets collapsed during the Great Depression, countless homesteads were abandoned.
Leaving behind silent reminders of ambition and hardship.
World War II introduced new dynamics, as military installations and wartime production brought activity and investment to the state.
In the decades that followed,
Montana continued to evolve.
balancing its historical industries with emerging ones.
Agriculture remained central, mining persisted,
And tourism grew as more people were drawn to the state's natural beauty. Places like Glacier National Park became iconic,
representing not just scenic landscapes,
but a broader recognition of the need to preserve what
remained of the untamed environment.
In the modern era, Montana exists as a place defined by contrasts. It is both rural and connected, traditional and changing.
Isolated yet increasingly visible, its history is not a straight line,
but a layered narrative, one that includes ancient ecosystems,
indigenous resilience,
frontier ambition,
industrial power, and ongoing adaptation.
The stories embedded in its art are not distant, they are present, shaping identity, influencing decisions,
and reminding those who live there that the past is never truly gone.
Under the wide sky,
where the horizon stretches endlessly, and silence carries its own weight,
Montana continues to be what it has always been.
A land of scale, of memory, and of transformation.